All right, yeah, so like as I was saying, I just wanted to have this meeting to review some of the work that we've already done in terms of moving some of these upcoming features and issues around on this prioritization board based off of value and effort. And then as a result, we can start to plan out what we're going to be working on in some of these upcoming milestones and have that reflected in our backlog. So I guess to start, I had a couple questions that I just wanted to get some clarification on from within this Miro board. And I do want to also kind of reinforce that, this pass in terms of effort that I wanted to do, I want to be pretty much solely based off of back-end effort. I know you guys probably have a decent view of what front end entails, but I actually do have a call scheduled already with Zach Cuddy just to take a pass at the front end level effort as well. And so I wanted it to only include for this initial pass with you guys of just the back end work, just because he's going to have a little bit clear idea of maybe some of the effort entailed in the front end side of things. And so I guess the first question I had was, so this first item here is the scopes as vertical tabs. And my initial assumption was that the backend effort for this would be extremely minimal, like there wouldn't be really much at all in terms of backend effort. Is that correct, or is there some backend effort that would be required when we move these over as like vertical tabs?
I actually don't think we need to change anything on the backend.
Okay, that was kind of my expectation as well. So I think based off of that, I would want to move this a bit lower down in terms of effort. I think, once Zach looks at this, he's going to move things up, but I just want to make sure like he's not starting in a place where it's like kind of more mid-level effort and then moving it up based off of that, because as we've mentioned, it's kind of on the back end side, it's going to be pretty easy, or there'll be essentially no work to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this down here in terms of back-end effort. And then once Zach takes a look, he can move it based off of how he feels for the front-end side. The second one, the combination tab, this one I do feel like is going to require some back-end changes. But I did just want to get some clarification from you all as to, like, do you feel like this is a good kind of spot based off of back-end effort of where this one belongs? And just to review what this one is we plan to eventually have a scope within global search that's either termed like all, or maybe it's just a combination of some of the scopes like MRs, issues, some of the scopes that are very similar in how they're displayed in layout, in terms of like people being able to search all of those at once instead of having to go to like issues alone and epics alone, being able to have a scope that includes all of those.
So it's searching all of those scopes, and the UI would just have like a different differentiator, like a badge or something on like what it is.
Yeah, so like maybe it's called all. That seems a little bit misleading to me, but maybe something called like work items, where it includes like issues, MRs, and epics. Something where they're all combined into one like scope or tab, as we call them today.
I don't see any too big an issue from the engineering effort. I'm curious what that'll do from like a performance standpoint. So there might be a little bit of effort there, but I think that seems about right for me. Dimitri, what do you think?
So I think the pagination might be the biggest issue. I don't think we want to do that on the front end. So we'll probably need to combine everything on the back end. So it might be slightly higher effort than we expect.
So for this one, do we want to also support the basic search?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. If it's a lot, if this is adding, significant effort to also make something available for basic, let's go into the assumption that we would start with it only in advanced search, and we would either have a separate issue for also making it available in basic, or we would consider not even making that as a possibility in basic. Maybe it's only a feature you get in advanced search. So let's just go under the assumption it's only for advanced, since if we feel like that's a significant effort to also provide that there. So based off of that, do you all feel like this is kind of like a good place for this? Would you say it's maybe more effort than we currently have it at?
I feel like oh, sorry, John.
I'm actually kind of taken aback by the value of it. I guess most of the time I'm looking for code, so I'm happy with the current tab. But what's the I'm sure you guys have done some research and whatnot behind this. Are we sure this is at the value that it's at?
Yeah. So the main use cases come up a lot is, maybe a user is searching for an issue, but it's actually been turned into an epic. So they're searching issues, but it's actually, if they had been searching, issues, epics, and everything, like it would actually show up, and they can never find it because it's actually an epic now. Also, like we could also be including comments in here as well. Now we have comments as like a separate scope. It could also be very valuable to have, comments included in some of these initial searches where they could easily find stuff that they had actually just commented on. Because right now it only includes like, title and description in the searches that we do for like issues and MRs and such. We have just gotten a lot of feedback that Sunjung did a research effort where she essentially showed like an all tab, and then had like separate scopes for like issues and MRs and such. And many users commented that they thought this would be great to be able to search across everything instead of having to know exactly where it was at, whether it's an issue, an epic, an MR. I mean, typically, I think you and me, I are more familiar with knowing exactly what it is, whether it's an issue or an MR. But there are definitely cases where, say you're trying to figure out if something even exists as like an issue. Maybe it doesn't exist as an issue, but maybe it's actually an epic. And so having those combined does provide a lot of value.
Cool. Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, it seems like slightly above medium effort, and that effort would be focusing on the performance and pagination, like response time stuff. I think that seems fair.
Gotcha.
And with this, we're not factoring in front end whatsoever with all of these estimations.
Yeah, exactly. We're just looking at backend at this point.
Okay.
I think it should be somewhere between epics and advanced search and language as facet.
A little bit more effort.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Just put it right around there.
That's good. We should probably, instead of thinking like, where is it in the grid, we should think of it as relative to other things.
Exactly.
That's good.
Yep. Let's see here. So language has a facet, like some work has actually started on this. Is that correct?
I believe we might have some backend work.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I know like there was some essentially testing done just based off of utilizing aggregations, I believe. It was either you or Terry, I think, did some of that work.
We have this feature behind the feature flag, and it's disabled as far as I know. Okay.
But the level of effort here is based off of some of that work already being complete. Is that correct? Like there's still a significant maybe amount of work that we need to do in order to get this functioning.
I think on the front end side, but probably not on the back end.
Okay. So back end side is relatively close for this language as a facet then?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. So maybe we can actually move this one down then. Would you say it can go all the way down into maybe this region down here, or is there still some work that makes it above the fold essentially?
I think here should be fine.
Okay.
I found that epic about this. I guess there's still some backend issues. That's how. Yeah.
Okay.
I can send the.
We'll just put it like right around here, knowing that there's some backend questions need to be figured out, and I know there's definitely going to be some front end work that Zach will move this around as well. But That was kind of my assumption, is that we had some of the work done, but there might be a little bit more back-end work to still do with this one. For epics and advanced search, so this is one where it would just be nice, since we have, most of all of our other scopes are using advanced search now. Epics is one that isn't, so we can't utilize things like, once we have labels as a facet for advanced search, we wouldn't be able to utilize that in epics at this point. So it's important for us to complete this even prior to probably getting labels as a facet, just so we can have it available on both at the same time. But I was curious, I know this requires adding epics into our index, but like, is that essentially making this at this high level effort, or is there any more work that is involved in this work?
Yeah, it's mostly creating a new document type.
Okay.
I think the rest should be quite similar to issues.
Right. And when you mean document type, I think we should, it feels like you're thinking making another index, like a epics index. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. I think the only thing that gives me pause is something I haven't considered before until today, is what Nick was talking about with issues being converted to an epic. I don't know if it makes sense to have them be in the same index or not.
Actually, when you promote an issue to an epic, it closes the issue and creates a duplicate epic.
Okay. But if you're searching for, okay, so if you're searching for something, you'll get the old issue, and then in another tab, it would say epics as another scope.
One will be closed and another open.
Okay, so you'd have two hits.
Yeah, and also this one is on the group level for the epic. So if you search in the project, you won't see it. You have to search in the group.
Yep.
Okay.
So based off of essentially creating this as a new index, like that essentially puts it up here, kind of like in this quadrant right up here, in terms of level effort for backend. Then everyone feels pretty good about that. Okay. And in terms of front end, there really isn't much work on the front end at all, right? I just wanted to be clear on that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it will be extremely similar to issues. So basically, we will use exact same views.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and also right now we have the basic search for epic, so we already have some of the front end components in place. I don't know whether we need more effort to address the front end.
Perfect. All right, labels as a facet. So this one I know we've also started some work on. I think it was Terry was doing work on this one. So I'm not sure where we're at in terms of backend effort on this one. I know there's definitely a lot of front end work that needs to be done still, but based off of backend, do we have an idea of kind of how much more work is required to get this one completed?
Actually, don't think we indexed anything for labels, but I'm not 100% sure.
Gotcha. And we were planning on using aggregations for this one as well. And so maybe we were kind of basing off like the performance of how languages was working before we worked on labels. Is that maybe a fair assumption? Or
yeah, I think that's a fair assumption.
Okay. So you say that maybe there's a little bit more work for labels in terms of backend than languages, but pretty close to that.
Yeah, because we already have languages in our index, but we don't have any labels.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, so this one makes sense to essentially stay where it's at. It's a bit more effort. Okay, that all looks good. Going down here to some of these other ones, this move group and project filters. This one essentially we're moving those filters that are currently by the search field over to the left bar once we've changed our scopes to be vertical tabs in the left bar. My assumption is this would essentially also take no back-end work, but I just wanted to essentially verify that with you all.
Yeah, I think most likely.
Okay, so I'm going to also move this one down, essentially same level as that. And we did want to do this one. It was a little bit higher importance than the syntax discoverability, mainly because some of the designs that we have for this syntax discoverability kind of relies on us already having these filters kind of moved and out of the way to give us a little bit more room for some of the things that we wanted to do with this. And so that's why it was a little bit higher in the prioritization. So I think I could explain on here, like our first iteration that we're looking to do for this syntax discoverability is a modal that would essentially open up based off of a link on the page. And so based off of that, you all feel pretty good about this still being a relatively low effort to complete.
Yeah, I think it's mostly front-end work.
Gotcha. Is there any back-end work with this one? Or would that all be considered front-end, like all the content and everything?
I think it probably will be front-end only.
Okay. So we can probably move this one down. I'll put it a little bit more, just because I know it's going to be higher effort, but okay. I already added some comments on the saved recent searches one, just because like I mentioned in the comment, like I know it's still placed a little bit higher than like, you know, low effort items on here. And so I just wanted to get some feedback in terms of, you know, what this really would entail from the back end side. My first thought for the first iteration would be we just leverage what's already available on the component. Actually, I just realized that I'm not sharing my screen with you all. Sorry about that. Would this be easier if I share my screen, or are you guys all fine just following along in Mural?
I'm all for sharing the screen just so I can see what you're looking at.
Yeah.
I mean, you can click on Nick's icon in the bottom and it will try to follow Nick, but it doesn't necessarily give you the full context.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I didn't realize I didn't share the screen. Yeah, so the saved searches one. So like I was talking about, we already have this component built where we have this recent searches area, this drop down available on the left-hand side, which we use on like issues and MRs and such. So some of this front-end work would already be done in terms of kind of having this available with the component. But my question was like, does this require like any back-end work in terms of like being able to store that information? Or I guess I'm not completely sure how that exactly works. So that's where I was curious of like the placement of this in terms of back-end effort.
I think my comment might be a little bit incorrect then. It's probably front-end only work then, if we just want to use existing functionality. I was thinking about a different feature, recently viewed issues and merge requests, but that's a totally different feature.
Gotcha. Okay. So by using, you know, this work that's already included this component, that should essentially handle most of the effort entailed in this one, if we were to do the recent only for this.
Yeah, I think maybe the only downside, it probably stores everything in browser. So it doesn't tie to your user account like we do with recent merge requests and issues. So I'm not sure if that's too big of downside.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's definitely, you know, not ideal. And I think, you know, as we continue to kind of work towards, you know, future iterations and better like improvements for this, I think that's things we can solve is, you know, making it so it's available, you know, on your profile, not just on your based off your browser history, and then also having the ability to have actually like saved ones, you know, potentially in the future versus just showing recent ones. But I think for a first iteration, for something that's, you know, relatively easy, since we already have it kind of baked into a component, I think it makes sense for us to leverage that just because we can get that out quickly. So
I think that's a very good suggestion, and also maybe for the future iteration, it would be nice that we can have a common interface that can be used by search and also the issues, so that our users they get a consistent experience.
yeah, absolutely. Because I know that it has been something that has come up on the plan team as well, of being able to have saved searches as well. So I think working with them, we'll want to be very consistent in how we develop that feature for having saved searches. All right. Date filter range. We feel pretty good about where this one's located. This is essentially just being able to filter results based off of a specific date range that you specify.
Is it for created date or updated?
My assumption would probably be based off of created date, but I don't have like a specific solution defined yet in terms of what we would do for that. I think like issues right now is in the date range based off of created date, I believe. They do have a date range, I believe, don't they? No, they don't. Maybe it was Mars.
My personal feelings, it works better for us using the created date than the updated, because we have many bots updating issues all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my thoughts as well. So I would, yeah, like I said, I would go to the assumption to probably be based off created date, but yeah,
that's yeah, I think that's right. We're the only thing I think that doesn't necessarily help with the create date would probably be for files in code search.
I mean, couldn't it be, would we have both options, right? Like if you wanted to put a filter on created or updated?
Yeah, I think it should be possible. Surgeon.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It's I think you take this one and say, where do we start? If it's the same effort on both of them, maybe that's something that we could take a look at, right? But it's I definitely didn't think this was the final list, right? It's like I think there's definitely opportunity to add more later too.
Yep.
This will be our first date filter though.
I think if we were to start, I think updated at would be the most useful. So we capture the code piece. If something is infrequently updated.
And the assumption on this particular box was that it wasn't code because it's yellow, but that's
okay.
That can definitely, that definitely has bearing when we get to code, right? Is that we would want the updated date, because create date on a file just isn't helpful, right? Like it just nobody really needs that date, I think.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I should have reinforced that. Like the yellow ones are essentially like non-code, whereas the green ones are related to code. Blue was UX improvements, and then the purple ones were related to kind of our front end updates.
Yeah, I think so. We're already indexing all of those dates. So it's just a matter of passing it to Elasticsearch. Dimitri, I would put that lower. How do you feel? What complexities?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a little effort from backend and front end.
Okay,
so a little bit of both.
Maybe I would put it below the, maybe somewhere down here, or how does this look? I'm trying to look at other ones. Doc search.
My assumption is doc search hasn't really been weighted yet, because I think that one's going to be some effort involved in that one.
I'm just putting it middle of the line there.
All right, sounds good. So yeah, I think I had a question on this one as well. So we have vulnerabilities in search, and I'm trying to see what I put initially. Yeah, so the plan for this first like iteration for vulnerabilities is just adding it to our index for the vulnerabilities team to utilize as essentially a way for them to have better filtering and such on the actual vulnerabilities page. So we wouldn't actually include vulnerabilities in the global search results. In the future, we definitely would want to look towards doing that. But for this first iteration, the goal is to keep this a little bit more minimal and to just essentially add it for another team to utilize to make that section of our product better. So just based off of that, does that still make sense where this is at? Or since we're only just adding this to our index, would this go a bit lower?
I think we might put it on the same line as epics and advanced search, because there are still some unknowns. For example, which fields we need to index.
Okay, yeah. And you said below epics advanced search, or like around the same area?
Yeah, roughly the same.
Okay. Sounds good.
There was fields identified in that issue, though, right? Was there more than that? Because I can definitely circle back to make sure we're working through the detail there. But
I know they did mention some fields, but I also know that there's been some additional work done on vulnerabilities lately, and so there might be some additional things to follow up with on that.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Doc search, I feel like this one probably hasn't been weighted because, like I said, I think this does require a good amount of work because I don't think we have any of the docs currently indexed. So based off of that, I'm assuming this is going to kind of move up to a higher level of effort. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's hard to wait because there are too many unknowns at that point.
Yeah. Go ahead.
If we consider the unknowns, that probably will be up in I mean the current place that you put maybe makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Since there's a lot of unknowns, having it pretty high, I think makes sense.
Just so I have context, what's the big unknown that you're thinking of right now?
I think the fact that we compile our documentation is the biggest unknown.
Yeah,
because it's not like we store it in our database.
Right. Okay. So essentially, I could kind of probably summarize that into like the sourcing of the content, right?
Yeah.
And also, I think another unknown may be how do we present this feature to customers who don't have Elasticsearch integration?
Yep.
Sounds good. Okay.
Yeah, and this is one that I honestly have kind of gone back and forth on whether it deserves to be this high in terms of value, even just because it's something that you can search today for docs. It's something that's available. Is it the best experience? No, but it's still something that you can actually do today versus some of these other things, you can't even actually do today. I know that there's still some limitations, perhaps with self-managed users and searching the documents, perhaps, but still, I kind of think the value of this one is a little bit lower than maybe what we have it in this activity currently, in my opinion, at least. But
yeah, the value is based on Gmail growth that is expected would come into other parts of search too. So essentially, somewhere around 40% of users are using global search. We expect that would increase because all users use documentation, and if that became the search where that was the only search for documentation, you would see it probably dramatically increase.
okay. All right, let's keep moving on. Include scope in the navbar. I'm not sure what backend work would be required in this one. Just to give a refresher of what this is based off of where you're at in the product currently, like if you're on a project page or a group page, we essentially automatically default searches to either that project or that group, as well as, if you're on an issue page, we'll default to the issues tab. And what this issue works to do is actually add something in the actual nav bar, essentially highlighting that instead of just having, the first drop-down option indicated, which is not always seen by a user. And so my initial thought was that this would be primarily just front-end work. But if there's anything I'm missing in terms of this requiring some back-end work, let me know.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment.
Okay. So I'm just gonna move this one also down just because I'm gonna let essentially Zach kind of put those where they need to be since they're primarily front-end work. Let's see here, adding metadata to code. So, we would start with maybe only one of these, but based off of, I'm also curious. So like one thing that me and John have talked about is like, as we begin to start indexing things for such as like code, maybe it makes sense to do multiple things at once instead of having to, make changes to the index, multiple different times in the future. And so, maybe we start with like doing things like author and date and other things at the same time, and how much, work that would entail for start adding some of that information. And maybe to begin, like in terms of what we show in the front end, we're only adding some functionality for maybe one of those at the beginning, but just adding these to the index. I'm curious to like what that actually entails on the backend side.
Quick question. What do we mean by author? So it's every user that changed this file, for example, or?
I think we would go with the created author, not whoever's modified it. I think it would just be based off of the person who created it.
All right. We need to double check which dates we have already, because we might have updated or created.
Okay, so we might already have
dates.
some of that information available.
Well,
Okay.
I think that's the idea, right? Is that this would be for the ETC piece, right? The etc. piece is really could hide a lot. I would say that if we needed a full list, we'd probably say like if it's searchable in the list view, like with issues list or MR list, those would be the candidates that we would want to look at. May not be all of them, but that's I think the larger version of the list that we would compile from. And so the idea is that if we're going to go reindex something like issues, we get all the data that we're going to need in the future in one shot so that we don't have to queue up reindexes every milestone or something.
Yep. And so to do one of these indexes where we essentially capture a good portion of this metadata that we're looking to start indexing, does it make sense where we currently have it placed in terms of it being a little bit more on the higher side of effort than lower?
Maybe we can put it a little bit lower.
Okay. I'll let you move this one, and go ahead, John.
I was gonna say, Dimitri, for each item that we add here, we'd have to do it in the indexer and bump the version and then change it in Rails, the indexer version.
Yep, and then I think reindex everything,
And then
with custom migrations, because we don't want to hit Gitly for everything.
I feel like it's in the sweet spot, man. Just taking under consideration all those moving parts.
Yeah, the migration part, I wasn't accounting that.
Yeah, I wasn't. I was just thinking, just bumping the version is kind of a hassle. But you're right, even just the migration to do the update by query and backfill, all that stuff. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, is it actually valuable to try to group these together in one shot, or is it actually, does it not matter because we have the same steps regardless for each addition?
Yeah, it feels like the same steps. Update the indexer. It's kind of almost the same steps of what we're doing with commits, right? Where we have to address new documents coming in, and then we have to also address backfilling documents.
Yeah, exactly. For some reason, I was thinking about just plain re-indexing, but that wouldn't work.
Do you feel like this should go higher?
Maybe near vulnerabilities or something.
But we feel it probably still makes sense to do multiple pieces of this data at the same time versus, it is, adding some maybe effort, but it's better than having to, re-index the stuff later on in the future, or add these things to the index in the future. Is that
So yeah, maybe we can give like an example. So let's say that we needed to add an extra date that we don't currently have, and we add an author that we don't currently have. Would it make sense that we would do both of those at the same time for issues, or would we not really matter because it's still the same amount of work if we did them at the same time or not?
We could potentially save the number of MRs and maybe a little bit of cluster performance, I would say, because we could potentially do that in one step, but the difference is probably too small to account for it.
Okay, well then that's your answer, right, Nick? So like, yeah, it doesn't. My assumption on it being, more efficient to get them all at once was incorrect. So we actually would consider breaking this out and then prioritizing individual pieces for their value.
okay? Yeah, that makes sense.
It would be correct for the case, for example, when we already have the source data in the index, I think. Yeah, but probably
yeah.
not for this specific one.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. This one is a very specific item. I'm going to actually just go ahead and, do I have the issue? Yeah, I already have the issue in here. I'm just going to ping Dimitri, you and John to just take a look at this outside of the sessions, because like I said, it's a very specific thing and you might need to do a little bit of investigation of what this actually requires. My assumption is that the majority of it's front-end work, but I know that Zach did mention that there's a little bit of back-end. I'm just not sure what all that entails. So if you guys don't mind just taking a look at this at some point. All right, export results. So I think this was pretty self-explanatory, being able to export the results list to something like a CSV file or some other form of document for a user. And so what are kind of our expectations based off of backend for something like that?
I'm not exactly sure how would the file look like, because we have hits, we have some surrounding lines, so I'm not sure how we would include that into the CSV file. So I think we need to clarify that first.
Okay, it's like unknowns for this one.
Yeah, I wonder how the other export works.
Maybe they use JSON or something.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking right now is how they preserve the search result. So, for example, if I update my database or if I update my Elasticsearch, so if we don't just export from what's already rendered on the page, the export could be different. I wonder, maybe I saw like maybe some export feature in other pages. Maybe we should take a similar route as those.
Yeah, I think when I first think about this, I think about we can set list maximums and minimums. We also don't have currently a way to change number of results per page. And so if you take the approach of saying it's what it shows on the page, and then we have a separate piece where we talk about adding the ability to show more results, we still need to, constrain that within our performance limits. But I think that you could go with a what's on the page approach separately than talking about the feature for adding or showing more than the default set of results.
If it's just what's on the page, like with pagination, so if it's like page 1 or something like that, then I think we can just stream the data. It's lightweight enough to stream the data. If it's like, give me all 1,000 results or something like that, I think it would not make sense to do that synchronously on the Rails controller, because the Rails controller is probably going to time out. At that point, it should just be like a async worker that puts things in object storage, which in that case, I think it would be significantly more complicated.
I agree.
Are you good with the idea, Nick, that we would basically limit it to the page, but then later talk about the feature of adding on the page the ability to show more results? Like, we haven't talked about that feature before, I don't think, but it's kind of a standard search feature in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I have some concern of like, I feel like export to most users will be like exporting all of the results, but we can make it clear if we were to only start with just what's on the page of like what it's actually exporting. I do want to kind of look into, like, CCs and others have mentioned, like what we're doing at other areas of our product and see how we're handling it. But we could base this first iteration for effort around just focusing on what's on the page, maybe.
What's the maximum per page limit that we have? I don't know if that's configurable. I've never messed with it.
I think we have a parameter per page, and maximum maybe 100 or something, but it's not documented anywhere as far as I know.
Okay, so if somebody did export results, they're just going to get the top 100 items. If we did the per page,
I think it would be 20 if
we're
20, talking about the default, but we could potentially override that for export. So I don't think it matters too much whether we return 20 results or 100 or maybe even slightly
500.
more.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Looks like for the issue list, they use a background job to export it. I tried it. It first pop up a window saying there are such many issues selected.
Yeah, we could take a very similar
as well. Nick shows.
Yeah, I almost wonder if there's just like an XML, the CSV or something that could work, but yeah.
This is a first. Oh, sorry.
You go ahead, Dimitri.
Maybe as a first iteration, we could just write that we will export first and objects like 500 or something. And we could do that synchronously without any background workers.
So I'm assuming we're not able to leverage any of the work they've done here since it's not using Elasticsearch. Is that fair, or is this something that we could leverage?
I mean, the actual data wouldn't come from Elastic, right? Like the only thing from Elastic would just be the list of documents, right? And then the rest of the detail, I think, would be coming from Rails, or but we get it from Postgres. Is that right? Or
yeah, I believe so.
yeah.
I think we could potentially use the same feature for basic search. I'm not sure if it would be easy to adopt it for advanced search, because we don't want to stream 43,000 IDs to Postgres.
Yeah, I think that would just be the constraint, right? Is that you'd have some maximum on it.
Elasticsearch does have a great feature called scroll, and I'm sure there's a database equivalent of doing it, but you can. It's kind of built for this, where you can create a point in time, essentially a pointer, where it makes a snapshot for you, and you can do an export based on that point in time. So if like while you're in the middle of streaming data from Elasticsearch and say your data changes, if you use that point in time pointer, you can get around that problem and you can scroll through your results as you go along. So Elasticsearch, I mean, I think this technical discussion we can have at another time, but Elasticsearch would be definitely something to consider for this.
That's interesting. Okay.
Okay. So in terms of like just having some unknowns and we're not really able to just leverage whatever is built for issues and having to do some of our own work. Yeah, I'll let you guys kind of move where you think it is.
How does that feel?
I think if we're talking only about first n objects, it can be slightly lower.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking migration.
Oh.
Maybe we should make different, maybe we should make different sticky notes. So like call this async export results. I don't know how to change the content of this sticky note.
You know, I think we in GitLab form, right? Like which is the lower one, and we make it that one, and then a more advanced one would come later, right? Think an MVP version of it.
All right. Well, in that case, I think we're all right down here. If it's
we just-
yeah, if it's synchronous, then we're golden.
And I think we just add that note into the comment. It's just that this assumes that it's synchronous, right?
All right, sounds good. So we're getting pretty close to time. Maybe we can just do like one or two more of these. The really ones that I wanted to focus on anyways was the ones more on this side because they're, you know, like I said, higher value. It looks like some of these haven't really gotten much weight, and maybe that's because there's some questions on them or they just weren't gotten to quite yet. But we can handle weighting some of these more asynchronously as well. But maybe we can at least cover this highlight one. So highlight words only on code results. So I know there's been a bit of discussion within the issue for this one of different ways to handle this. But I'm just curious, you know, from the backend perspective, like what do we feel like is the effort to handle this one instead of highlighting the entire row on code results, of just highlighting the keywords only?
I think it should be relatively low effort.
I think, no, I was going to say, isn't our current highlight on just the words? It's just a front end thing.
Oh, it's only the front end that's causing the entire row to be highlighted?
I believe I don't have any familiarity with how the front end does the highlighting, but just from my experience with Elasticsearch highlight, I think it just highlights the term. If I'm not mistaken. So I think we have words on by default, and then probably in the front end, we're changing that to lines. Unless Dimitri, unless you're familiar with some configuration change or something.
I think we might have gone with something universal for basic and advanced search.
Okay.
That's maybe why it doesn't work like we expect.
I remember Zach also mentioning how like we do some really weird splitting of like words in some of these, which makes it really difficult for highlighting. Let's see here.
Yeah, maybe we should just use highlighting terms from Elasticsearch.
And I remember
basic
that.
search. Yeah, we can just use the current version.
I like that.
Okay, and how much? And I'm assuming that's some backend work. What's that required from the backend side?
0 backend work, I would say, unless assuming we already asked Elasticsearch to highlight our stuff.
We asked to highlight, but I'm not sure if we use this data correctly. So I need to double check.
Okay, so but that if we ask Elasticsearch, that means it's already in the controller, the response, assuming. So it's just a matter of wiring it up to the front end. If that's the case, and we can use Elasticsearch, I would put this as a low effort backend. Definitely. Okay. I'm gonna put it maybe with the date range. I'll get a line.
Cool. All right, that looks good. All right, I think that's pretty much all we can cover in this session. Like I said, if you guys are able to take some more time and if you have any questions on like these ones that are currently on the x-axis, if that's why they haven't been moved, feel free to reach out or ask those questions and ping us. Otherwise, if you can just move those around based off of what your thoughts are on the level of estimation. I did make a point here too, like we're trying not to have things on the same level in terms of like x-axis in terms of value here, just because one of the points of this exercise is to force us to say like, we feel like this is more important than this other feature. So these were all moved onto like the same level. So if you guys have thoughts on where those should be placed in terms of value even, feel free to move those either left or right. But yeah, I think this has been helpful in terms of kind of figuring out some of these lower effort things. And like I said, I'll be meeting with Zach to help kind of estimate things from a front end perspective, as I feel these will definitely move around a bit based off of that. And we'll have kind of a better idea of what are actually like the very easy ones to accomplish first. And then we'll work on looking at some of these and seeing if there's ones that we can break apart into like some maybe smaller chunks to make them easier to complete. Like we essentially did for like the export results one. Like that one we kind of initially estimated higher, but seeing that there's a way we could do it for lower effort, we're going to start with that maybe as the first iteration. So we can do similar things maybe with some of these. I know some of them you can't really break apart and add value at the same time. So it might be more difficult for some of those, but it at least lets us know kind of which ones might require some either like multiple milestones or it'll take a bit longer for us to complete. Before we wrap up, you got any questions?
Yeah, I've got one, Nick. So this is definitely my perfectionism talking. So take this with a grain of salt. I was going to ask, would it be productive to put tick marks on this grid? Like for any arbitrary number, like 1 through 10 or whatever. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it can just be helpful in terms of being easily to scan and seeing like where you have certain things placed. Like you were trying to like, compare it to other items on the list. And I think that that's the best way to really do this, not look at it as just like a scale, but like being able to compare certain features against each other. And so I think having maybe those tick marks might be helpful to do that. So I can definitely do that. I can add that here, or I can do it in the future when we do these prioritization activities.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I didn't know if this is like supposed to be like a relative eyeballing exercise, or because I feel like if we put tick marks, it would put them on a scale, right? Like it said, this is a 1.
Yeah.
Or a,
I mean, the general idea is to not get too in depth into like the actual like figures you're giving for effort, because it's very arbitrary right now. We don't know like the exact solutions we're going to be doing in exact effort. It's supposed to be just kind of like gut feeling of like, do we have a lot of confidence in what we're going to do with this, or a lot of questions? And I can even show you like another prioritization activity that some other designers have done that's similar to this, but it's very much the same in terms of kind of just moving things around and not really getting too specific in terms of like the actual like effort in terms of like weight or like tick marks as you put it. But to your point, it can be helpful just in terms of measuring the other items that are on the grid as well, just by having those markers, I think.
all right, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for all you guys' help with this, even like the async work that you did. It was helpful for me to kind of get an idea, then have some questions ready for this session as well. Is there any other questions that you all have?
I have one idea. I have one idea is that just to understand on the things that are still on the line, right? If you review them and you're okay with it, like I think either a comment or just even like, I don't know if we want to nudge it on the line or something so that it's not middle of the line. Just to know those got reviewed, I think is helpful.
Yeah, I would prefer not to have anything on the line. Just we're either saying it's like a little bit easier or a little bit harder. Like a line is like essentially the same as having things aligned like this. Like we prefer not to do that. So after you kind of take a look and have an idea of what you feel it is, just if you can go ahead and move it up or down, that'd be great. Cool. Anything else? All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate all your participation.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
All right. See ya.
Thanks, Nick.